afternoon and a very warm welcome to respected Dr. S. Raja Samuel, resource person for today's session. Dr. Savita Bhagat, Principal DAV Centenary College, Faridabad, and all the participants from different parts of India. Today is the third consecutive day of the Professional Development Program on Scholarly Publications organized by our reputed institution, DAV Centenary College, Faridabad, under the able guidance of our worthy principal, Ma'am, Dr. Savita Bhagat. The resource person for today's session, Dr. S. Raja Samuel, Principal, Madras, School of Social Work, Chennai. Sir has 21 years of able teaching experience at PG level, four years experience with NGOs, and has conducted about 15 research studies. Under his guidance, 4 scholars have already been awarded doctorate and 4 scholars are presently pursuing. Today, the topic on which Sir will enlighten us is presenting qualitative and quantitative data in scholarly publications. I welcome you, sir, on behalf of entire team of DAV Centenary College, Faridabad. Research is an unending process. Today, the only way to survive is to forge ahead through innovation and research. It is rightly said that leaders are those who always empower others, which well defines our principal ma'am as our leader. Our worthy principal ma'am, Dr. Savita Bhagat, has taken up this challenge to transform the mindset of each and every faculty member of making them well equipped and well developed to face this new situation posed by COVID-19 scenario. We are really grateful to you, ma'am, for your constant support, motivation, and guidance, for providing us this appropriate platform and facilitating us with all the possible opportunities to groom ourselves and become better mentors. Now, I would request our worthy principal ma'am, Dr. Savita Bhagat, to start this session with few words of wisdom. Bhagat ma'am.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you so much. Good evening and namaskar to everyone on the third day of the Professional Development Program on Scholarly Publications. We have with us Dr. Raja Samuel, Principal, Madras School of Social Work, who is going to give his talk on presenting qualitative and quantitative data for scholarly publications. I extend a very warm and hearty welcome to the Principal, sir. We are obliged to you, sir, for having accepted our request. The pandemic has created a lot of stress and disturbance in our lives, as our colleges and schools are still closed and we are not able to live life normally as we were used to. But if we look at the positive side, the increasing use of technology during this pandemic has brought people sitting far from us. These webinars and video conferencing are really very useful tools for learning from experts sitting in the farthest part within the country as well as from outside the country. I am obliged to you this evening that you have joined us and want to thank you once again, as your senior faculty, Dr. Shakti, has helped us a lot in designing and organizing this 5-day professional development program. We have not said it officially, sir, but it is definitely a collaborative effort between Madras School of Social Work and DAVCC Faridabad. We would look forward to such mutually beneficial knowledge sharing programs with your college in the future as well. As for the title of today's session is concerned, it's about presenting quantitative and qualitative data for scholarly publications. Sometimes I have seen that even very simple steps of presenting data into tabular form by arranging it into columns and rows become confusing as to how to present the relationships. Variables, when arranged in tables with clear titles, measurement units, along with sources quoted correctly, can also help in making the body of the paper very impressive and results very clear and precise. These days, we have very sophisticated statistical packages and researchers use all sorts of analysis and tests, and many times without understanding the basis or rationale of the test. So presenting data is also an art in order to make findings interesting, understandable, and also to get published in good scholarly journals. I know the participants are very eager to listen to the views of the expert in the area. So I once again welcome all the participants from different parts of Haryana and from other states of India to this professional development program. And I'm sure that they are learning and enjoying the sessions. Thanks to the conveners, Dr. Ankita, Priya, and technical team members, and to the moderator of the day, Dr. Jyoti Malhotra. So without taking much time, now space over to Dr. Samuel for your presentation. Welcome, Dr. Samuel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, madam, for this very warm welcome and the nice words. And I'm delighted to be part of this unique faculty development program. And thank you so much for inviting me to talk to such a large audience, such a large and distinguished audience. I'm honored to be invited by the DAV Centenary College. My special thanks to Dr. Savita Bhagat, madam, for her warm welcome and invitation, and also for the coordinators of the program. Now let me get into the program straight away. I will share my screen. Okay, I hope you are able to see the screen.
Yes, sir.
Fine. Now, as you know, the research is a very important part of any academic activity. Not only that, it's also useful in several ways while we are trying to understand society and trying to make sense of social phenomena, what we observe, both social as well as other phenomena. Research, particularly in the social sciences, has come up with a lot of ways of, collecting and presenting and crunching data and making some sense out of what we see. So it has got two main approaches, as all of us know who have done some research, both quantitative and qualitative approaches. And quantitative approaches have some way of collecting data as data, whereas qualitative data has got some other way of collecting and presenting data. But now increasingly, earlier we were focusing mostly on quantitative data for social sciences, but now all of us as researchers are being called upon world over to have both quantitative and qualitative data in our studies. And that's why we are talking about mixed methodology these days, where we try to either do a large quantitative study and supplement it with qualitative data, or do a small qualitative study to get us a feel of the variables and then launch a big quantitative study. So these are the ways by which we are collecting information and doing studies these days. But it's also important to know how we present the data, and particularly in this 1 hour, we'll be focusing on how do we present data or publish data in scholarly journals. Of course, there are slight differences from the way we present data in our reports and in our scholarly journals. So that's what is going to be the focus of this particular session. Now let me go into the background of this. Now let me set the background of this topic in particular. Now, whom we are writing for? Generally, from studies, we have found that there are, as you can see, there are more than 2 million peer-reviewed journals published each year, journal articles particularly published each year. And all of us know that it's very difficult to access, and it's also very expensive. Now, we want to download an article from the paid journals like Sage or Elsevier or any other database. They charge anywhere between about $25 to even more. So it's very expensive generally. And so it's mostly read, whenever we write and publish in those journals, it's mostly read by PhD scholars and postdoctoral scholars and PG scholars. And one of the things is, it was startling to find that 82% of the articles in humanities are not even cited once. Mind you, it may have been read by a lot of people, but they're not citing it. Now, in NAC and in NARF and all those rankings, citation index is a major indicator now being included. So we need to find ways of, not only publishing articles, but also publishing articles in a way that they are attractive to the readers, and the readers can really get interested in reading the whole article, and then also cite our article in their own papers. So this is how we need to look at scholarly articles. And of course, now there are other considerations that is going to shape the way that we present data, which means it's a lot of competition. There are too many people who are writing. And, one of the main considerations on why we are looking at this topic today is, print journals, the space is very limited, and they are very expensive. So which means we need to say things in a very crisp way. We need to present data in very short, as much as possible in a short form, and the tables must be very neat and crisp. So that is why we need to look at how we need to publish or present data. Now, of course, journals themselves have guidelines. You may have noticed that, all journals have guidelines, like the word limit is there, the table must be in a particular format, and graph. And there are also limits in terms of the number of tables that you can include in a particular journal article, or the number of graphs you can include. Not only that, all the editors of these journals are very busy people. So we must do a lot of work ourselves and not give too much work to them, because when you give too much work to them, they get a bit put off, and then they don't want to look at our article very closely. And so our first impression must be to attract the editors. And for that, we must reduce their workload, which means our article must be properly written, neatly formatted. The language must be well written, and as much as possible, we must reduce the errors in the language also. And then there is a process of review, revise, and that process, very often when it goes back and forth, when you write to the editors, they write back, and it sometimes takes 6 months also for a paper to get through finally. So that's also another consideration we have to keep in mind. And of course, the audience these days, because it's going to be online journals, the audience is international. So we must put our best effort to these journals, because it's going to an international audience. Your name of your college particularly is going to go international. And I think we should have that credibility to hold the name of ourselves, as well as our discipline and our college also, and do a good job while writing these journals. And of course, now there are nice tools available for data processing as well as word processing. For preparing graphs and charts also, we have fantastic tools are there. Apart from Excel, we have a lot of other tools also. But for generally, Excel or the Word is more than enough for our journal requirements. Okay, now let me go into the purpose. Now, the way we present data is going to be decided upon the purpose of data analysis. Now, what this slide tells you is basically gives you is the purpose of data analysis, particularly quantitative data. All of us know that the purpose is to describe and summarize, for which we use frequencies and descriptives. Then one of the purpose of data analysis is to find associations and correlations, associations between two variables, correlations between two or more variables. So for which we have this cross table or two-way table, and we also have Pearson's correlation. And another statistics we use is to find differences between data, find differences between variables or groups of data, for which we use t-test if it's just two variables, or if it's more than two groups, we use ANOVA. And of course, finding influences and predicting, for which we use regression. And when we want to group variables and summarize them, we use factor analysis. So this is the purpose of data analysis, all of us know. Now, each of that has a particular way of presenting the data. Some needs tables, some don't require tables at all. For instance, chi-square, you don't need to put a table at all. You have a frequency table there or a cross table, and below that you just need to give the chi-square data value. That's more than enough. We don't need a separate table. So like that, there are different ways of presenting this quantitative. Now we are going to look at data presentation in quantitative presentations or quantitative data in journals, and then we'll go on to qualitative data, right? Now we present data in terms of text, which means we write up the data. We give this percentages in the writing up itself, in paragraph format itself, we will include the percentages, or sometimes we can also choose to present data using tables. Now tables and graphs we will use to the minimum in scholarly publications. Otherwise, in other reports, when you do a research and when you're presenting a report in your college or when you're doing it for a funded project, let's say UGC project or ICSSR project, those kind of funded projects where you give a report to the UGC, you can give extensive tables. And you can also give a lot of tables in the annexures as annexures. But when it comes to journals, you need to limit the number of tables, and journals themselves will give a limit. So we will come to it later on, some of the conditions that journals give. Now, one of the primary ways is we'll be writing up in the form of text. Now, I will show you some examples of how you can write up data, both from the descriptive level and up. Okay. Now, when we talk about descriptive statistics, the most important statistics is the mean and standard deviation. We won't be presenting the other in very much the mode and all that we don't use much, but mean and standard deviation is the most commonly presented statistics. Now, this is how you need to write it up. For instance, I've written up the sample as a whole was relatively young. That's a description of the data, but it's given in the parentheses. Within brackets, we give the mean and standard deviation. Mind you, one of the things that we must remember is never give mean alone. It must always be accompanied with the standard deviation. You should not, the mean in isolation does not make much sense unless you know the standard deviation. As long as the standard deviation is small, the mean is really a strong statistics. And if there is too large a standard deviation, then it means the mean is being pulled on either sides by the extreme data or outlier data. So it's important for the reader or any knowledgeable reader to make sense out of the mean. You must always give it with standard deviation, either within the parentheses or the next example. You see the average age of students was 19.22 and the standard deviation is 3.45. And you must also notice that we are not going to give more than 2 decimal places, right? It's 19.22 only. You should not give 19.2, 2, 3, 4 and all that. No, the other decimal points, only 2 decimal points. Even if it is 1, it's fine. Not necessarily that you must give 2. Okay. Then, of course, that's descriptive statistics. Then when we have to give percentages, we have to give it always within parentheses like this and without decimal places. That's going to be very important. It's not that 49.5%. No, you have to round it up to the nearest next number and present it as a whole number. So you can present it like this: nearly half of the sample was married. So there's a qualitative way you are trying to describe that percentage, but put the percentages in brackets. Now, if you want to write down the percentage as it is, like 49, FORTYNINE. If you want to start a sentence with a percentage, then you start with the word 49 percentage. Then you can put that in word. But if the percentage is coming in between the sentence, you can put it down in numbers like this. Okay, so that's thumb rule for presenting percentage. Okay, now let's come to writing up text in the form of chi-square statistics. Chi-square statistics is used to find the association between 2 nominal variables. Okay, so the level of measurement is also important to understand. So chi-square is used typically to find if there is any association between 2 nominal variables. Now, how do you write it up? You should give the chi-square value, and then you should give the degrees of freedom value. You can put as DF is equal to 1. In the first bullet, I've said that the percentage of participants that were married did not differ by gender. Chi-square value for 1 degree of freedom, and for n means sample size, n is equal to 90, and then give the chi-square value, which is 0.89. 0.89 is chi-square value. Now, chi-square value should be significant to say that the association is significant, right? So which means you have to give the significance level also, which is P is less than 0.05. P is greater than 0.05, which means this is actually not significant. But we have to say, even if it's significant or not significant, you have to give the chi-square value like this. And how do you describe the chi-square, your result? Which is, this is how the next bullet says: the sample included 30 respondents who had never married, 54 were married, which means you are just giving the number of respondents. And these frequencies were significantly different. Chi-square, again, 3 is degree of freedom, n is sample size, and the chi-square value is 10.1, and p, exact p also you can give. Either you can put as p is lesser or greater than 0.05 or 0.01, depending on the probability level you're fixing for a study. Maybe you need to understand some statistics also for whatever you want to, whatever you're listening now. Exact p-value also you can give, which is 0.017. Okay. This is the way to present chi-square value. This is normally given just below the table. Not necessarily below the table. Once you write up the table, two-way table, cross table, when you write it up, at the end of it, you give the chi-square value. Now, this adds some kind of weightage to the study when you give the chi-square value. It confirms the association between variables, or it also says that there is no association, whichever way you want to consider. Okay. And correlations, correlations is between two data, two variables, which are measured at the interval level generally. Okay. You can't use correlation for nominal level and ordinal level data. There are non-parametric correlations available. Probably when you study statistics, you'll be studying all this. You can use those kind of correlations. But for typical Pearson's correlation, we use only data at the interval level. Okay. Now, it's very simple to write up correlation. The two variables were strongly correlated. Then you give correlation value. Okay. And 55 is the sample strength. Correlation value is 0.49, which is actually a very weak, not very strong correlation, but just as an example I've given. And the probability value. Again, for correlation also, you need to give the probability value. So these are some of the things that are compulsory to be included in the writing up. T-tests, of course, T-tests, you're only trying to find out the difference between two groups. Okay, within a particular variable, you have men or women, which means there are two groups. So within that, you are trying to find out whether there is a difference. So here, the difference they are trying to find out is two groups of people, one older and one younger. Okay, and whether there is a difference in the mean age. Okay, now you can see how it is write up. So the number of participants is written, which is 36. Then the mean is given, which is 27.4. Okay, as I said earlier, when mean is given, you must give standard deviation also along with it. So SD, standard deviation, is given within brackets. And then the interpretation is written where significantly older than the university norm of 21.2 years, which is you are comparing it to a norm. Then you give the t value, okay, is equal to 2.95 and the p value. Again, here the probability value also should be given. Similarly, the next explanation also talks the same thing, where who studies more, whether students of psychology study more or students of some other course study more. So you have this, standard deviation 14.2, mean is 121, and the t value is given plus the probability value. Okay, so this is how you need to write up. These are some of the things that are important and compulsory in writing up the t-test. Okay, now let me go over to one-way ANOVA. ANOVA is used to find out the difference between more than two groups of people. For instance, if you have people from, let's say, students from 3 different colleges, and you want to compare the scores they've got in a particular subject of the 3 different colleges, then you can use ANOVA. Okay, so here they're comparing 3 different groups: high dosage group, moderate dosage groups, and the control group. Okay, so these are 3 groups that they're comparing. Now, for each of the group, there is a mean and standard deviation, right? Because ANOVA compares means. T-test also compares the means of these 3 groups, or 2 groups or 3 groups. Now you see, so you have to give the means of all the 3 groups, the high dosage group, low dosage group. Similarly, in the example I said, the 3 colleges, you're trying to study the motivation level of the students. So college 1, college 2, college 3, you must give the means and standard deviation. Then you give the ANOVA score, which is last, the F value, right? 8.76, and the probability value. Okay, so this way, this is how you need to write up ANOVA. Anyway, this presentation is probably will be shared with you. You can keep this as a record, but there are a lot of Google resources to help you understand how it has to be written up. And some of you would have already written up these kind of things. Anyway, regression results, as I've written here, are often best presented in the form of a table. But you want to write it up, you can write it up like this. Social support significantly predicted depression. Regression is to predict variables. You can predict either one variable or a group of variables and the influence of that on the dependent variable. So this is to predict independent variables, the influence of independent variables on dependent variables. Okay, so you can see that beta value is what, minus 0.34, t value is equal to 6.53, and p value. These are the three values that are used in, you need to first mention and then go to the regression value, R square value, which is 0.10, 0.12, and F value, and then the P value. Now, these are some of this. Now, when you do statistical analysis in a software like SPSS or any other software, there are plenty of software available in the market. Any other software, it will give you tables. And from the table, you have to pick out this information alone and write it down. The table will also give you, a lot of other things. But when writing it up, you need to give only this information. Particularly, sometimes in journals, you're not expected to give tables of, particularly regression will have 3 tables. Actually, when you put a regression analysis in SPSS, it will give you 3 sets of tables. One is the ANOVA table it will give, then it will give the regression table, then one more table. So these 3, you don't have space to present in a journal. So you have to extract this data from, this data comes from at least 2 of the output in SPSS. Okay, one from the ANOVA table and one from the regression table. So you'll have to extract data like this and write it down like this. Okay, so that is very important for in terms when you write for journals. Now, some of the common errors in writing it up, we have to, I've just put here some of the common errors that we make and we have to avoid, which are better options I put on the right side. On the left side, we usually give the errors. Now, what is the error in the left side on the first row? This percentage, we are unable to understand out of what, right? So out of 113 subjects, 70 were not aware, which means 62% were not aware. So if you give bluntly 62%, the out of how many will not be easily visible, particularly when you write papers and you are presenting the secondary data from a variety of journal articles. There are others who have done studies, and from that study you are quoting a particular statistic. You can't simply say a 62%, right? Because that study sample is different size, and you're also going to include another author's study in your paper. That sample will be different. So when you present particularly data from other studies, you'll be very careful. You must present the complete data like this of 113 subjects. I'm talking about the first row, 113 subjects, 70 were not aware of, and that 70 is what, 62%. Okay, and same way, if you look on the left side, there was a significant difference in the proportion of case patients and control subjects. This is a bit confusing when you write it like this, right? Now you have to make it very clear by how many were case patients, and out of them how many reported eating something, and how many were the control subjects, and out of that so many were reported eating something else. Okay, so you give this data, then it becomes very clear for the reader. There's no ambiguity here. Again, you see the p-value on the left side. P-value is 0.0001. You don't need to give it like that. You just say that 0.01, significant at the probability level of this level. Okay, then next table you see the problem here is in percentages 21.01. It's not required. I said percentages can be rounded up to the nearest value, so 21%. So that's a better option. Okay, and again within the brackets also percentages can be rounded up to the nearest decimal point. Same way, the last row also have the same issues of the p value 3.24. You don't need 3.24, just 3.2 is enough. And here the p value is 0.143, just 0.15 is enough. So all these can be followed up. Now, again, you have to be very brief and crisp, but again, you cannot miss out on important data. That is also very important. You see on the left side, when you read that, you're not able to make out anything, right? So when you have to write in a very clear way. Here again, the eating, the description is very clear. You are able to understand how many percentage, you are able to understand the p-value and everything you are able to understand. So this is how you need to write. Now, let us come to tables, which means data is presented not only in writing, but also in tables. And when you come to tables, it's important that you follow some very important guidelines, which I'm going to share now. We will look at some examples of tables and then also work out. Okay. Now, descriptives is how you must present these tables. Descriptive, if you want to present it as a table, particularly if you're doing PhD and you want to present the descriptives in your study, you can present like this. And even for when publishing, you can present descriptives like this. If the mean and median is going to make sense, please include. Otherwise, don't include mean and median. Okay, sorry, median and mode. Now the standard deviation has to come next to the mean. So this, you must always remember, this median and mode comes in between. You don't need actually. And minimum and maximum is also given in some cases. To understand the mean, you need sometimes a range also. Range is the minimum and the maximum. So you can give a table like this for descriptive statistics. Then, of course, you have ANOVA. This is the table that is given by SPSS for ANOVA. You have this between groups and within groups. As I said, while writing it up in the earlier section, I showed only you have this means, the F value and significance value, degrees of freedom. This is what you require. This is the only data you require from the table. Okay. Now API is given a format like this for reporting ANOVA tables, where you see even the earlier example, while giving tables, there no vertical lines are not given. That's a format now. Vertical lines are not required to separate your columns. You don't need to give vertical lines. Only those 3 horizontal lines are there. Same way here also, below, in the below example, SPSS output will come like this, the first table. But you have to convert it into a table like this, where they are saying the table title is at the end, left end, okay, table number and table title, and then left aligned, and you give degrees of freedom, you give the sum of squares, then you have the mean squares, then F and the p-value. Whereas in the ANOVA table given by SPSS, sum of squares comes first, then degrees of freedom. But APA is asking us to do it like this. So you need to rearrange the columns according to the format that is required by journals in particular. APA format is very much accepted by most journals, unless sometimes some journals give their own format, but otherwise APA is generally accepted, APA format. Okay, right. Okay, fine. This is a table which has a cumulative percent. You know, very rarely we will use this table which gives a cumulative percent. When do we use? We want to use, let's say, up to 29 years of age. What is the percentage of people? You want to find out at one glance, and if it makes real meaning, then you should give this table. Otherwise, please don't use this table at all. I'm also showing you examples of what you don't need. So that you are very clear, not only what you need, but what you don't need also. So you can see that you don't need this table generally, but if that particular data is going to make much meaning to you, then you can give this data. This cumulative percent, SPSS automatically gives it in all its output, both the percent and the cumulative percent, right? Both the frequency and the cumulative frequency. But you don't need most of the time, unless you want to just at a quick glance for groups of the interval, how many persons or how many sample you have got, you can find out. Okay. Now this is a typical two-way table. Two-way tables are basically two variables. Okay. Here designation is one variable and whether they have a degree or not is another variable. Now for two-way tables, one of the important questions that all of us have is, how do we give these percentages? Whether you want to work out column wise or row wise. Now I have worked out percentages here row wise, which means 13.5% and 86.5% equals 100, which means 19 samples and 122 samples is total 141. So percentages have been worked row wise. In some cases, percentages can be worked out column wise also. But in SPSS will give you both. But you should not give both in a table. You must remember that either you should give row wise percentage or either you should give column wise percentage. Both are not required. So how do you work out this percentage? How do you decide that it should be row wise or it should be column wise? That's always a question, no, in mind. Now, if you are having your independent variable on the left side, which is on the row side, the head of NGO project manager is independent variable. And if you have the dependent variable on the top side, column side, then you have to work out row percentages. So row percentages should be percentages worked out according to the independent variable. So if you put independent variable on top, which means on columns, then you have to work do column percentages. So according to the way you put the independent variable, you have to work out the percentage. That's a thumb rule, general thumb rule that makes life easier for you to interpret this two-way table. Okay, this is a very popular form of table, and you know, two-way tables, when you put for your data, you must be very careful that there are not too many cells. Cells is one set of data. You know, this 19 is one cell and 122 is one cell. Now you must ensure that the cells are not empty. Particularly in a journal, I said the space is very less. So you have to try to combine adjacent columns or rows to create a very compact table. You can't have a very lengthy table, this cross table in particular, right? So you have to combine these variables, combine this, you know, subcategories of those variables, all the categories you can merge and then make a very compact table like this. Okay, then that it becomes easier. So that's one thing that you must remember for journal publication. Okay, now this is an example of a very large table, which if you have large data, let's say your data is some 5,000, 10,000 samples which are putting data, then you can put a large table like this. And this is an example of a combined table where you combine more than one variable, right? You have gender as a variable on the left side, you can see you have gender as a variable, you have marital status as a variable, then you have education level as a variable, right? So you have three variables in the same table. So this is a combined table. This is also good to save some space. Okay, so as much as possible, even for your PhD, when you present your thesis, you can put this combined tables. That's the order of the day nowadays when you put, and you know, this is also good for journals because it saves a lot of space. So you can combine tables like this, and you see again the vertical lines are avoided, only the horizontal lines are given, so that it's not very very congested, very kind of very thick, densely put. So it is very free to look at when you put it like this. Okay, now there's also sometimes when you come up with the multiple response questions, right? You have this multiple response tables very often in social science studies, where if you ask people the number of the things in their home, the family, they will have TV, they will have fridge, they will have a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler. So one person can have more than one thing, so they will tick multiple responses. So this is how you must present multiple responses. This is another way of presenting data of multiple responses, which is you should give the count and the percentage. Now advocacy itself, you'll have 100, which is out of 204. More people would have mentioned both Some would have ticked advocacy, some would have ticked information sharing, same person would have ticked resource sharing also. So this is how you can present multiple responses. Okay. Of course, correlation. Now, you are not required to present a correlation table. This is the output from SPSS usually, right? But in journal articles, you need not present a correlation table like this. It's okay to put it in your PhD thesis. It is okay to present in an ICSR report or UGC report if you do a study with correlation and all. But for journals, this kind of table is not required, or because there is no space, and a lot of empty spaces is there, which is not at all required. Okay, you need to, for this, you can simply pick out the significant data, which is this 2 asterisks are there. No, correlation is significant. It's all marked with asterisks. So that asterisk data alone, you can put up, for example, age of NGO 0.227, it's significant at 0.01 level. So that alone you can take and write it up in a text format. Otherwise, I will also show the next table. You can compress it like this. Very important variables which are coming out significantly, you can present it like this. Instead of a large table with empty data, empty cells, you can present it like this. Okay, so this way you can reduce the size of the table. Either you can write it up as a text format, as a paragraph format, or you squeeze it up like this so that you make it very simple. Okay, now then this is a t-test table, which is again, this is how you must present it. And now SPSS will give you in a different format, slightly different format, but SPS will give you within group and across groups and things like that. But this is how you need to present it. Okay, just a sample. Okay, now all of you know that for anything, ingredients are very important, right? So if you want to make a cake, the ingredients are very important. I wanted to find out, even if one ingredient is missing in this, the product will not be tasty at all, right? Even if one ingredient is missing. Can somebody point out through chat or something, if you have access to chat, somebody can point out anything that is missing, any ingredient that is missing? Or you want to unmute and say also, you can say. Is there a possibility for them to chat? Type in chat.
Our national flag is
actually, sir, chat has been disabled.
Okay.
Participant will send messages only to the host.
Okay, fine. Okay, then I will say the answer for this. In fact, there's something called sugar that is missing, which is a very important ingredient, right? Sugar is sweet. Cake is always sweet. Now, if that one ingredient is missing, then the entire thing goes off. That's the same way with also the tables. If something is missing, then the whole thing goes off. Now, I'm going to tell you how a table should be in a journal. Now, all these components are very important components. Even if you miss one, then it doesn't make much meaning, or sometimes the meaning is not complete, and the journal article, the editor will have some problems with it. Oh, this is some basic things are missing from this table. He or she may say that, and then put it aside. So what are the things that are very crucial or components of a table? Now, table number is very important. Each table must be numbered, and the table number must be given. We usually center the table number. No, that's not the APA style. APA style is it should be on the left side, left aligned. So table number is left aligned. Then you have the title also left aligned, not centered, right? Table title. And you see the table title is in italics, right? Not in normal font, italics font. So that you must remember. Then you have the subtitle, which we call the stub. That is a variable title. Age group is a variable title that's called as a stub. So that must be there. For instance, if you put a table, cross table in SPSS, this subtitle will not be there. This age group, that subtitle will not come properly. In most tables, so you'll have to right click that, edit it, and then add this subgroup most of the time. So the sub heading is very important. Age group with the subheading. Then if you come at the same top row, you have the column spanner or with the heading of the data. That's a score. The data which you're presenting in this table is the score, right? And the score has two components, which is mean and standard deviation. I remember I said that standard deviation must be always given along with mean. So mean and standard deviation is there. That's the two columns. So you have those headings, right? Then you give the age group. Then n is the number of samples. 1522 is the number of respondents or number of samples. Then you have something called as the body of that, and each data is in cell. Each of that is called as a cell. And then did you notice that standard deviation is just 1 decimal point? It should not be more than 1 decimal point, right? Then you have the notes. Now notes are very important for any table, because if you have to explain the table, sometimes you require notes. Now one of the things very important is 80 plus, there is nobody. Now we can't assume by simply putting a dash that people will understand that there is nobody in 80 plus. You must give a footnote to the table saying that no participants were found for over the 80 group. Very often, we simply put a dash or 0 or something, and then we assume that the reader will understand, but it's not true. We have to really put the meaning of the dash. What is it? There are no participants. Okay, so that's how notes. So this is the component of a table. So all these components must be there very clearly. And again, you may have noticed that there are no vertical lines in this. There are all only horizontal lines. See, horizontal lines, it makes the eye not very, otherwise it looks very congested or dense. So the vertical lines are generally removed now. This is the format for the table, the components of a table. Okay, now this is very crucial. Now you need to, whenever you write up a scholarly journal, try to put a table like this. Then the more likelihood of getting accepted. Okay, now can you find out what is the problem with this table? I mean, you probably cannot chat, but you can tell to yourself what is the problem with this table. I can identify several problems with the table myself.
Sir, if required, should I enable the chat?
I don't know, when I'm throwing this PowerPoint, I won't be able to read the chat. So it's
Yes,
okay.
sir.
I will
Okay.
explain. No problem. I'll explain.
Okay.
So you see here in this table, you find that the table title, there's no table number, is not given, right? And the table title is bold font, which is not required. Normally, we tend to do that in our tables, but it's not required for publication level tables. It's in bold font, which is again not required. And you see all these vertical lines are there, which makes it very dense. It's not required. Then you have, you don't have footnotes. For example, agriculture, there is for 1980 and 1985, there is no information, not applicable, not available. So, but we must give a footnote and say that it's not available, right? So that is missing. And you see the decimal points are there for this percentages, which is 2 decimal points, which is not required. 1 decimal point is more than enough for data, right? While putting in tables. So these are some of the mistakes. And the subtitles are all right aligned. It has to be centered. Okay. So these are some of the mistakes that I was able to point out. Yeah, this is what this abbreviation. So which geographic area, again, notes, we need to add notes. The data source is not there, particularly when you borrow from secondary, when you do secondary desk analysis, where you borrow data from a variety of sources and write up a paper. We need to provide the data source also below this. This data is taken from the Ministry of Statistics or something like that. So you have to state that data source values are centered rather than, all the values must be right aligned. Only the table title and subtitle must be centered, but all these values must be right aligned. Okay. And values need not be displayed with 2 decimal places because there's too much of information which is not required. Okay. Even the total 100 must also have one decimal value, 100.1. So that is how 100.0 actually. So that is the decimal value must be maintained. The abbreviation not available is not explained, and the great shades in between is not really relevant because it doesn't explain. You want to highlight a particular row, then you can put a shade. Otherwise, it's not required. Okay, and you see the table is spread out across the width of the page. So there are a lot of spaces, empty spaces. For instance, on the left side, transport, residential, right side, there is some space. You don't need that space at all. You can, bring it much closer. Like that, for each column, you can bring it closer and reduce the size of the table. Okay, right. Now, some of the errors that we use, particularly in table titling, you see, in table as well as figure titles. For on the left side, the title of the figure or table is very brief, but on the right side, see, it's very clear. It's cases of measles by date of onset, Chennai City, Tamil Nadu, November 2004. So if you put a table title like this, it becomes very clear, or a figure title like this, it becomes very clear, right? So that sometimes you can also put the date November 2004 in the footnote. This data pertains to November 2004. That's also acceptable. You can either bring it to the footnote also, but ensure that the table, once people read from top to bottom the table, they can understand the entire context in which you are saying, the data, which year it came, and what is the place. The geographical aspects are also mentioned. Okay, and now when you write up the table, normally we write it like this on the left side. No, table 1 indicates, table 1 describes, and it is seen in table 1. It's better to avoid that. And on the right side, you see, you can give the table 1 in the brackets, within brackets, instead of putting it in the text. Within brackets, within parentheses, you can put. Okay, sweetened varieties of areca nut were the most popular, so it is given in table 1. Now that is a much more better way of presenting it. Now normally we use the format on the left side. Figure 1 is presenting, figure 2 is presents the data like this and that. But for writing it for journals, you can use the description on the right side. This is how. So put everything within brackets. Right. Now, okay, now I am through with the tables. Let's move over to figures and charts. We've already reaching 5. So I'm sure we can, all these are familiar to you. We should be able to read them. Okay. Now, when do you present figures? Now, figures like scatter plots, you can show when large amount of data, particularly if you want to show the characteristics of the distribution of raw data, right? Not tabulated data. For tabulated data, you can use the charts like, bar diagrams and pie charts and things like that. But raw data, when you want to put a chart, then you cannot do a table for a large amount of raw data. Then you can use scatter plots and figures. Okay. Now you should use figures only when the table, you are not able to put a table and the table is not confusing, it's not showing a clear picture, then you can put a figure. Okay. For instance, figures can show trends much better than table. A trend of changing over time, because the bar diagram, when you put the bars are larger, going larger year after year, or the graph goes up year after year, then it's easy for the eye to see. So that way, if you want to show trend, use figures. Otherwise, for other data, you can use tables itself. Okay. Now, when you want to color, put color or all that shading and all that, you have to be very careful, because for the eye, even the shades really matter. You may find in this diagram there is a bar in the center. It appears that on the left side it is light, right? It's very light color. On the right side it's dark color. It appears like that, but actually it's not that. When I separate it, the same bar I'm putting below, you see that it's of the uniform color, but when it is put within a context, it shows something different. So that's how colors can mislead. Same way, this green circle in the middle and the pink circle on the right side. Both are of the same size, but you see on the right side, the circle appears to be larger because it's surrounded by smaller circles. These are all visual illusions. When you have to remember, when you draw diagrams, pie charts and things like that, these kind of visual illusions also happen. So you have to be very careful in coloring or not coloring. It's best for journals not to color your charts, right? Charts, very often online journals are colorful, but otherwise print journals are always in black and white. So it's better not to use colors. Okay, that's why I wanted to show all of this. Okay, now pie charts are one of the best charts for presenting nominal data. You can't use it for ordinal or interval data. Nominal data, pie charts are the best. And now pie charts can really make some meaning if you present it like this. You can see the difference between men and women, and you see, but the way you must present it is you must give the percentage and the description of that percentage within the pie itself. That makes it. Sometimes Excel also gives one arrow and then you can put it outside. That's also permitted. But both must be given here. The percentage must be given here. Don't put it as a separate legend. Please don't put it as a separate legend format at all. It is not easy to understand. It's not easy to read. Readers have to look at the legend and then the color and then try to understand what it means. So don't put legends at all. It's not advisable at all. Put the percentages right on the slice. And also the category title like agriculture industry right on the slice. Okay. So this is the best way to present pie charts. Now, sometimes bar diagrams are much better than pie charts. You see, on the left, there is a pie chart. The same data is given on the bar chart on the right. But in the left side, the pie chart, almost the slices look like same size, no? So you're not able to find out a very important difference between the various categories of data. So the pie slices look similar. But when you convert the same pie chart into a diagram, you find that very clearly there is one small bar and one large bar. So you're able to visually see the difference in the data. So to give better difference between the categories, you put a bar chart instead of a pie chart. When you have only 3 categories or 4 categories and there is clear difference in those categories, then you put a pie chart. Otherwise, when you have more than 4 or 5 categories of data, you put a bar chart. That's better. Okay, which as you can see, the bar chart is much clearer, right? Okay, now this is a format for a bar chart. Typical bar chart is like this. Now you see, I've used only one color for the bar chart and it's in gray. Okay, the title is left aligned and you give the category title below the bar chart itself. But one more thing that is missing in this bar chart is the percentages. Okay, percentages of frequencies. Frequencies must be listed above the bar. Okay, now you see there is a fertility rate which is given in the bar chart. On the left side, it's all given in random fashion. But when you organize from small to large, it makes much better sense, right? On the right side, it is much easier. Okay, which country is the largest? You are able to immediately tell. Georgia. Which country is the smallest in terms of adolescent fertility rate? It's Greece. You are able to immediately tell. So arrange the bars in this fashion when you put a bar chart. Otherwise, reader has to look at each bar and find out and, try to find out, right? This way, it's easier. Same way, on the lower part, left side, you are giving different colors that is not required. Okay. Please don't put different colors for the bars. This is same data, which is adolescent fertility rate. It's not different data, the same data. So adolescent fertility rate. So you don't need to give different colors. Put the same color. That's much more accepted. Okay. Now, one thing you have to avoid is this 3-dimensional bar charts. Now, Excel gives you fantastic 3-dimensional bar charts and cone diagrams and cylinder diagrams and all that. But please avoid this because this is not very clear very often. And particularly the color scheme when you put, it's sometimes really not very clear, right? So what you can learn from this chart is the percentages on top, it has got 2 decimal points, which is not correct. You should have only 1 decimal point or no decimal point. Please round it up to the nearest number, which is 93.7 must be 94% actually. So put it like that and avoid these three-dimensional pictures. Let it be flat. Okay. Another diagram which we normally use is histogram. Histogram is used when you have this continuous data. For example, age group is a continuous data. Score is a continuous data. Score in a particular psychological scale or a particular scale is a continuous data. So it's a frequency of patients who have got this particular score in a particular measurement tool. And if you have this continuous score, you have to bar chart, you can't use for this. This is a histogram, right? Histogram, you can you have to calculate in a particular way in Excel. You have to do some formula. It won't give automatically, right? But SPSS will give histograms easily. So you can get histograms from SPSS. Okay. Now, this is another popular diagram you can use in journal publications. This box plots. You see, there's another variety you can use. Again, you can follow. Line graph is a very popular variety which you can use, which gives the trend very clearly. So that again is a scatter graph is another thing. See, these are all raw data, not group data, not categorized data. It's all raw data. So when you have plotting raw data, this will give, this you can use for correlation. Okay, correlation relationship between variables. Now, structural equation modeling, a lot of people are using for analysis, SEM, structural equation modeling. This is a kind of chart that will come out. This actually comes from my own PhD thesis several years back. So this is another chart that is used. Bar chart. This kind of chart is a SEM chart. This output will be given by the software. You don't need to do anything. This exact output will be given by software. Now, one thing, what we need to avoid in a diagram. Okay, on the left side, you see you have some legend that is given, that is not required. You have some blue background that is given, that is not required. Okay, you have some green background that is given, that is not required. So please don't clutter your chart like this. Just simply give a very clear chart which is on the right side for publication. Now, if you want to do a report for your own college or for your own, let's say for UGC or for others, you can give this diagrams, colors and all that you can give. But for publication, please give a very clear chart and put the number of percentage on top of the bar, right? That's the best way to do it. Okay. Now, even in this diagram, this chart, there are a couple of mistakes. For example, the title is not there. Of course, there's a note here which is the leading cause of cancer deaths and so on. But one thing which is a problematic in this chart is the exact bar where it ends. We are not knowing. There is on the right side, if you see 50,000, 1 lakh, 1.5 lakhs. But exactly where the bar ends, there's no measurement. We are unable to see the exact number of cases. We don't know, right? So we need to avoid this kind of mistakes and make it self-contained. Very clearly, we need to mark it. So the number of deaths we can mark there itself. We can give the number of deaths. There itself, new cases, we can give the number near the bar. That makes it much complete. Okay. Now, some interesting facts I came across while preparing for this presentation is, incidentally, this is not, you should not follow this as a real truth. It's been found that high impact factor articles have more graphs than tables. Okay, and there's some trivia also here that more men were using graphs than women in scientific articles. Okay, some interesting phenomenon like this has been observed. Okay, and multi-author papers had more tables and graphs than did single author ones. Okay, multi-author papers had more tables. These are some of the facts about journal articles, tables and graphs, but these need not guide you. You be guided by the requirements of your paper and the journal. Okay, now that's about quantitative presentation. Now I'm going to go to qualitative research. Okay, qualitative research is based on how you collect data, which is very often qualitative. It's a method of collecting data. Okay, now it's mostly unstructured, and if you want To collect data from individual, it is unstructured in-depth interviewing, or you do a life history or a case study of an individual or a community or a two-person group or a family or organization or a large group also you can use. So data collection is individual based. You go meet the individual and collect data. Sometimes it's also group based, right? You use focus group discussions. So FGDs are a very prominent way of collecting data these days. All of us use FGDs now very prominently, and you also use group interviews. Sometimes you also use observation, like psychology particularly. You can observe children while they are playing, and then you can take notes. So all that is their participant, non-participant observation. These are all based on methodology. And of course, sometimes you collect data from documents, historical data. You collect from documents, basically from documents, which is archival, means beyond 50 years. And secondary is the lifetime of the researched. Somebody is living, you are doing a biography of them and or research from living persons, then you do secondary data. Okay. Now, you end up with data like this, right? Now you have to group it into the themes first. So that's how you start with first level presentation of data. Now this is how data is. For example, this data is from a focus group discussion with a group of youngsters who smoke. Okay. The question was, why do you smoke? Now these were the answers given for why they smoke. Now this data is in a very mixed up format. We need to separate it into and put it in the form of a table, right? How do we do it? We have to find out themes. So you have to find out similar statements and group them, right? So that's how I've done in the next page. So whatever statements are related to pleasure, you group them. Whatever statements are related to being sociable, you group them. Whatever statements are related to self-confidence, you group them. Then you put into a table like this. So this is the first level of data presentation in a table. Now, some journal articles, this kind of grouping table is enough. If you group like this and then you interpret it, that's more than enough. Okay, but sometimes these are the ways of visual display in a qualitative article. Okay, you can have a box display, which means you can put something in a box and write it up. You can have a flow chart, you can have a ladder, you can have a matrix. Now out of this box display, flow chart, matrix, these are the three common forms of display. Sometimes you may use a modified Venn diagram, but out of this display types, only three prominent types are generally used. Okay. Now, as I said, you see flow chart and matrix that are the most common, and use this from a journal article I took. The most popular forms of display of qualitative data is a matrix form. I will give some examples of matrix form in the next slides, and the flow chart form also, box display, right, and modified Venn diagram. These are the prominent types of data display used in qualitative data. If you have qualitative data with you, you can use this kinds of presentation. Okay, this is an example of a matrix. What does matrix reveal you? It's like a cross table. It's like a two-way table, where you put there in quantitative data, you put percentages. Here, you just put in the actual data, actual words that the people have spoken, you can put, right? Actual concepts you have learned from them, you can put here. For example, you have two categories of data on the left side, two groups of mothers. One is young mother and one is older mother, right? And for young mother, what they have said about feeding their children, onset of soft food given to children, and the type of food, the frequency of soft food per day, all that is given. So actual data is put into this table. This is a good example of what a matrix is. So qualitative data is normally given in matrices like this. This is enough for more than enough for a journal article, right? You don't need more complex analysis at all. This is more than enough. This is a good way of presenting data. And from this, you can describe the patterns, what is coming out from here. From this, you can say that, the mothers who are older mothers, the frequency of soft food is reduced. Okay, depends on the appetite of child or things like that, but the frequency is reduced. And the types of food has also come down. Like that you can interpret. Okay, this way of presenting qualitative data. And you can also have comparative matrices, like this matrix for one which is implementation features. You have the top title and the subtitle implementation features, and then you have outcome features. These are the two data, and for that, from each campus, you are plugging in data like this. So it's not quantitative, it's just yes or no, and you're not giving numbers here, but you get a picture of what is the training like, okay, and how is the workshop delivered and planned, how is it implemented and all that. So this is one good example of a matrix. Then you want to have cross case comparison. We are doing cross with two locations. This is a particular data from two different locations, and the variables are on the concepts are on the left side, and for each of the concept, two different locations, data, actual data is plugged in here, right? So this is how you present a matrix. I'm showing more examples of matrices because that's the most common. There's another matrix here. You see on the left side, you have household types, traditional, partnership, female-led, and all those are household types. And on the right side, you have shaping factors. And there are three categories of the shaping factors. Actual data we are giving in. What the women said, what the men said, and what you observed, all that is plugged in. Okay. Then you have this relationship charts. This is you may have heard about conceptual mapping, right? So this is a typical concept map where you plug in the variables in those boxes, and then you also indicate the relationship with the form of arrows. So this is the relationship chart. Very often you do it sometimes, before you do a study, you read the review of literature, collect all the variables, and also from the variables, from the review of literature, you just mark this conceptual map, right? And then you go and measure it. We do that in quantitative studies. In qualitative studies, we do that after the data is collected. Then you find out what is the relationship. This is after you have put the data in matrices, then you find some patterns from it. You put a chart like this to show what data it is coming out from the matrices, what relationship is coming out from the matrices. So this is a very prominent form of presenting qualitative data. This is again a flow chart similar to that, but there is a sequence to it. There's a hierarchy to it. So that's how we use a flow chart. Now, this is another interesting that's being used now in qualitative research. It's called as a word cloud. You may have come across this very prominently nowadays. So the word cloud is when you have words that are coming from a focus group discussion, you put all that into a particular software. Then this is actually the problems in water and sanitation, particularly in sanitation in different cities. I did a study some time back, and this is the word cloud that I used at that time. Okay, this is another way of presenting. Then another prominent way is to present quotes, actual quotes. So when you write a journal article, here and there, if you give quotes, that's interesting for the reader. So this is how you need quotes. You see, the quote is always given, the quote is the exact words of the people, and you always give it in italics, and it's always indented lightly from the left side. It's indented, right? So it's indented up to about, let's say, half an inch or something inside the content. So that's how you need to present the quotes. So I've taken from two different articles where the quotes are actually coming in. Okay. This is box, where you put a small caselet inside a box like this within the journal article. Okay, you write up the journal article, but you want to highlight a particular case because, qualitative research is all about individual. Sometimes you study, you can put it in a box like this. Okay, that's a good way of putting it. Then, of course, you have conceptual diagram framework. You can put all your variables and try to see how they are linked up. You can present this. Normally, this is for when you do your methodology section and you want to highlight the relationship between variables, you can do that. Or after your study, you can put up a conceptual map like this. Okay, now I'm finishing. These are good books for qualitative research, which gives good examples of matrices. Probably when the PowerPoint is shared with you, you can look at these books. These are original authors, and I will always read them from them because they are very clear. They themselves are very clear. Okay, thanks. I finished my presentation, and in case there are questions, I'm sure we'll have to take some time to answer them. I can stop the share. Yeah.
Jyoti ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Sir, it was a very wonderful session, quite elaborative and quite detailed.
Okay.
So we have a lot of questions, but As there is a time constraint, I'll be asking few questions from you.
Sure.
Question number 1. Please explain types of research papers, conference papers, empirical paper, review paper, analytical paper, articles, etc. This question is asked by Tarun Soni.
Well, this is a very large question, and I don't know whether this is within the scope of my presentation. Now, I can tell you that there is a difference in the way we present data in all these articles. For instance, if it's a review, you don't need any data presentation at all. Not much data is presented in a review of a particular paper, right? But if it's empirical paper, if you're writing an empirical paper, you need to give data. You need to give actual data because it's an empirical paper. Empirical study is a data-based study, evidence-based study. So you need to give data. Otherwise, for the variety of several things may not require a table at all. You just give running matter. Runningly, you can text. So that's my initial things, but it's a large, if we have to closely look into the difference between each of the paper, there'll be a lot of differences. But in terms of data presentation, you can, wherever data are to be presented, follow these guidelines, whatever I've shared with you.
Okay. So question number 2. Please share some equations for data representation. Example, chi-square data. This question is asked by Dilpreet Singh.
Okay, chi-square, basically you have to give the chi-square value, which is the x squared value, that is, you have to give that. And before giving the chi-square value, you have to give the degrees of freedom and the sample number. And that's very important. The degrees of freedom, DF, it's called DF. So chi-square, give the degrees of freedom, and then give the chi-square value, and finally end it up with the probability value, p value. These are the core things that that is very important in a chi-square value. And mind you, chi-square is used only for nominal data, and chi-square is used, it's an outcome of a two-way table. So these are some of the things that you must remember.
Thank you, sir. Next question. Please explain content analysis with example. This question is asked by Ashish Lind.
Okay, if you go back to my slides, one of the things that you would have seen is the first, I gave the list of responses from people who smoke, right? I gave a list of responses. Now, the next slide, I grouped the responses into 3 columns.
Categories.
That is called a simple content analysis. That's a good example of what a content analysis is.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Question number 4. What is meant by probability sampling? Any difference between one-tail and two-tail test? This question is asked by Bhuvneshwari.
Okay. Now, probability sampling is called as random sampling, which is each sample has the equal probability of being selected to be included into the study. That's called probability sampling. Now, the difference between one-tailed and two-tailed is, now, the direction of the test can be both this way on the left side and on the right side, which is, you have a normal distribution curve, right? You have heard about normal distribution curve.
Yes.
Now, the direction can be either on the left side or on the right side. When you are exploring both, it's called as a two-tailed test. But when you are exploring one direction, it's called as a one-tailed test. It's a statistical term, that is all.
Thank you, sir. One more question. How we can differentiate between qualitative and quantitative data by looking at the data? This question is asked by Kamal Talukdar.
Okay. Quantitative data will have only numbers. Qualitative data will have actual words in the table. That's the main difference between quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative will have only numbers.
Thank you, sir. One more question. How is data presented in SEM? Written in a research paper. That is how the results of SEM is presented in scholarly journals.
Yeah.
This is asked by Bindu.
Okay. Now I showed you a diagram which is the model actually that emerges from the data. It's called modeling. Okay. So it emerges, the model diagram you have to present, which is those variables and the strength of the influence of those variables on the other variables. So that model diagram, plus there are some important statistical terms that you have to give in the description that the SEM output will give you. From that, you have to collect those data and then describe it. That's all. Very simple. There are models available on the website, on Google. If you search how to write up, you will easily get it. But both the diagram and the description must be given for ACM.
Okay. Thank you, sir. That was from the question answer side. Now, I would like to thank you. We'll have a small vote of thanks. Thank you, Dr. S. Rajas Samuel, for this wonderful and informative session, which has definitely added to our knowledge. A big thanks to our principal ma'am, Dr. Savita Bhagat, for her untiring and relentless efforts. I would also like to thank convener of the program, Ms. Ankita Mohindra, co-convener Dr. Priya Kapoor, organizing secretary Mr. Dinesh Kumar, Ms. Ritu Sachdeva, and Ms. Uttama Pandey to ensure the smooth execution of this session. And my sincere thanks to all the participants and faculty members who have joined all across the country. Thank you so much. That is from our side. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.